Hey, it's Paul Banas of GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my additional weekly podcast focusing on resilience. And I've got a guest today, Andrew O'Brien, who's going to talk to us a little about the link between stress and resilience. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure, I'm really interested in this link because I think a lot of people know that that if they're feeling stress, that maybe that's a warning sign that they aren't resilient, or if they get into a stressful situation, they want to know how to bounce back more quickly. So maybe as a background, let's hear about why you have some expertise on this. I know you're a coach and you do a lot of work with people specifically on this, but give us a little bit of your background, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always say is that like many coaches out there, they're in the niches that they're in because they've experienced to some degree what they're actually like supporting others with. And so yeah, I spent a lot of my life struggling with feeling chronically stressed, feeling that burnout translated into all sorts of different physical stress symptoms, emotional stress symptoms. And throughout the years, while I was trying to figure all that out and manage all of that, I came across like bits and pieces of science
Mm-hmm.
along that journey. And it really came to like a boiling point. My last battle with and my final battle with my own chronic stress and burnout, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And it just got to a place where I said, life can't be this. It was very tough. It's tough. And if there's any listeners out there who are experiencing this chronic stress and burnout, it's not a fun place to be. And I knew that there was more to life than just experiencing this. And so I basically compiled all of the science that I was picking up along the way. And
Let's talk first maybe about some of those symptoms because I think I used to have a corporate job and was under the gun all the time. And I know that kind of feeling like you're biting your fingernails and maybe you're overeating, maybe you're over drinking, you're kind of afraid all the time, you're worried something's going to blow up, you may be working too hard and not getting enough sleep. There are all kinds of other things. What other kind of symptoms are there? Maybe I've covered maybe I've covered most of them when you know like this isn't just like a lot of excitement or a pressure, but it's gone now into a dangerous stress level.
yeah, so they run the gamut. And some of mine that I've experienced from the physical side. Have you ever experienced like an eyelid twitch?
No, yeah, but and I've definitely seen that, especially a lot of people on TV. Like, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
This was happening to me for like a year straight, incessantly.
Hmm.
And that was a big indicator to me. I had a bout with hemorrhoids. Hope that's not TMI for this podcast, but like that can be a symptom of
Stomach
stress.
distress, any kind of stomach distress, ongoing every day.
GI issues for sure. Headaches. Thankfully, I haven't experienced those myself, but headaches can absolutely be physical stress symptoms. Skin rashes can be physical stress symptoms as well. It truly runs the gamut. Some physicians even speak to some cancers as being a result of ongoing stress that's not managed proactively. And yeah, it truly runs the gamut from a physical
Yeah.
side. On the emotional side, of course, you have like your depressions, your anxieties. If you're feeling down and you're not clinically depressed, that could be a sign of unresolved stress.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we talk a lot about the links between all these health related issues. I mean, the ones that are slightly more benign, but still unpleasant, like GI issues, but all the way through. I think that the link between stress and cancers, heart disease is now firmly established. It's not something you want to do. So sometimes we also talk about good stress. I've been in situations where, especially like hardcore seminars where they're saying, there's bad stress, but this week is going to be good stress. We're going to keep you going and we're going to keep you pumped
Mhm.
up and excited and everything. And that's considered good stress. Do you believe that there is a good stress and a bad stress, or is that other thing we call good stress, something more akin to excitement or passion or something else?
Yeah, no, I do believe that there is absolutely good stress. We're human, and as humans, we have a stress response system, and that system is innate to us. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of the human condition, and we want it. We want it because what it's doing, what the ideal state really is to kind of flow in and out of that stress response system, really kind of experiencing the stress, going back to homeostasis and flowing through that throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of the life. That's the ideal goal when we're talking about managing our stress. We're
Mhm.
managing our stress response system. And so there are many types of like that good stress and so many different things and that I bucket into that category. One of them being like that like motivates you to do something additional with your career that you're passionate about, for example. If you have a wedding coming up, right? And that's can be considered good stress. Like it's something that you're really excited to get to. And there might be some things along the way that you're like, you just, need to kind of like navigate and get through this. But like at the end of the day, it's all for good. And the other thing that I consider good stress is what our brain, like the amygdala inside our brain, that's responsible for our fear response center. This is truly connected to our stress response, and what that amygdala is doing and what we want it to do and what it's there to do is to protect us from real threats.
Right.
So the amygdala is constantly scanning without us even knowing,
Yeah.
right? It's constantly scanning for threats. The unfortunate part is that the amygdala doesn't know the difference between real and perceived.
Right.
And so it often takes in that perceived threats as real threats, and that could be overwhelming for folks, but there are ways to manage that. But I consider that good stress because when we are confronted with a real threat, that's stressful.
Yeah.
And we want that stress because that's going to enable us to either fight, like flee, freeze, whatever the response is going to be, whatever that amygdala is telling you in military to do, it's going to do. And that is absolutely a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
I think sometimes also we get confused between good stress and bad stress, or we get addicted to the bad stress because we think, I mean, this is true for type A people, I think, is that they feel like they need that pump of energy and they get attached to it kind of as a way to drive them forward. Do you see that a lot in your clients that you talk to?
100%. And I would call myself one of those. I'm a recovering perfectionist, as they say. And yeah, so that is, and that's why it's so important for us to stay mindful of our, like when we look back, if we can imagine for just a moment what the cave people experience was a much more simple life as it relates to all of the technologies and all of the information that's being bombarded to existing day humans, right? When we look back at the cave people times, yes, they might have experienced, they did experience like day-to-day stress, but they did experience day-to-day stress and they were able to kind of get back to that homeostasis because at the end of the day, they were hunting, they were gathering, they were communing, they were eating, sleeping, doing basic things. And if they were out hunting and gathering and they came across a real threat, maybe they came across like a wild animal that wasn't so friendly, their amygdalas would have done the same thing that they're doing for us right now and activated that stress response in the way that it's supposed to. And then they would kind of get past that and transcend back into that homeostasis. When we compare that to what we're experiencing right now, our brains have not yet evolved to meet the demand of all of that influx of information, most of it being negative, whether that's from social media, whether that's from TV media, friends, family, newspapers, whatever the case may be. We're being inundated with all of this information. And as I mentioned before, that amygdala doesn't know the difference between real and perceived. So it's taking so much in. And that's why it's paramount that today humans, we need to be managing this proactively to avoid slipping into that chronic stress phase and ultimate burnout phase.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm sure the early cavemen people you allude to must have had really stressful lives. I mean, they were just trying to make it through the day, and most of them didn't live to, till 5 or 10 years old. So it must have been stressful. I wonder why some people seem to be more driven by this, or maybe they become addicted to the stress versus other people who, I mean, you certainly know people who are completely Zen, but you also know people who are completely Zen at like 8 years old. They seem to have it. And that wouldn't seem to follow the evolutionary path. You think we'd all be programmed to be totally freaked out all the time and needing to calm ourselves. But like you say, maybe the real homeostasis, the real middle point is this wave that you're riding. You're able to, when stress is required, when you're in the jungle and the animal might be behind the tree, it's there to propel you. But then the rest of the time you are off the wave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more that we do proactively manage our stress, the connection to resilience, the more resilient we become. And the metaphor that I bring into this piece is like, imagine like a roller coaster. If you've ever been on a roller coaster, what we're doing, like the goal of life is we are going up. Like it starts going up on that first peak, right? And then it goes up slow. And then what does it do? Like it kind of hangs out up at the top of that first peak. And that's what I consider like the highs of life. So we're going up slow, appreciating And then we get to the peak of that first part of that coaster, the first peak, and you hang out there for a bit. You enjoy like that high of life. And then what happens? It goes down, and it goes down fast, and it doesn't like hang out in the trough, in the valley of that roller coaster. It goes pretty quick. That's my definition of resilience. It's riding the highs, appreciating the highs, hanging out here for until like a challenge comes your way, until an obstacle comes your way, and then getting through the lows of life effectively, efficiently. And what happens if we are stuck in that activated stress state? It's kind of almost the opposite. We're hanging out in the valleys of the roller coaster and not so much appreciating the tops of the peaks of life.
Right. Right. So I know on your website, and we'll put that in the description, the mindblowingcoach.com, you got some resources, including a 10 tips that you can download. Maybe is there one or two of those that we could get to that are the most important that people should know about?
I can definitely highlight a couple. I don't like to use the word important, like most important, because these 10,
Yeah, it's gonna
whenever
work.
I give my talks and presentations on this, they're all equally important.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can definitely highlight a couple of them. And I'll highlight one that's like maybe like a reminder or basic, and then I'll highlight one that maybe people might not be, super aware about. And so from the most like basic we can get, it's oxygen. That's one of the categories. It's that deep breathing, that deep conscious breathing. I guarantee you, most of your listeners right now, they're not deep breathing. I'm certainly not deep breathing right now. I'm shallow breathing. And even that shallow breathing can lead over time to feeling chronically stressed and burned out, because at the end of the day, our brains use actually about 20% of our total body's oxygen supply. And so if we're not fueling our entire bodies with that deep breath, our amazing brains are not getting what it's craving. And there's a slew of different breathing methods out there that might resonate with folks. So I'm not gonna call out any in particular, but the bottom line is that breathing, that deep conscious breathing. I invite you to think about how you might incorporate that more into your day. I've been working at this for a very long time, and I'm still not doing it all throughout my day, but it's something that I strive to get to. So that the oxygen part is one of those domains. And then a second domain that I can highlight on the piece that might not be super aware for folks is what I call expression, and more specifically, emotional expression. And what do I mean by that? There's a whole body of science called the mind-body syndrome, where if we are not actively acknowledging what we're feeling and then releasing those emotions in healthy ways, we're basically like holding it inside. We're bottling it up. We're suppressing them. And more often than not, the clients that I work with, myself included, we were raised in a way that we weren't taught how to manage our emotions. We weren't like encouraged to express what we're feeling. We were encouraged to like hide what we were feeling, especially when it comes to those, I don't like to use the word, but negative emotions. All emotions are part of the human condition. I embrace all of them. It is okay to experience all of them. It is okay to experience all of them in one day. And so I fully embrace all sorts of emotions. So I don't like to use negative, but like the things that I'm talking about when I say negative are like the anger, the shame, the guilt, those types of emotions that we can and often experience. If we keep bottling those in over time, they're going to bubble up. And what the science shows is that when they do bubble up and overflow, they can lead to those physical stress symptoms that we talked about before, the emotional stress symptoms that we talked about before. And so the goal is really to create what I call an emotional highway without traffic, because there's always going to be something, an event, a situation, a person that's going to trip you up, that's going to make you feel something. We're never not going to live a second in our day without feeling something, because we're human. We're always going to be feeling something. And so there's always going to be something that makes us feel something. The trick is to keep mindful of what you are feeling, acknowledge what you are feeling, embrace what you're feeling, because it's part of the human condition. And maybe as you're acknowledging it, see what this emotion is trying to tell you, what might you be able to learn from
Right.
and then in as real time as possible, release those in healthy ways. And I say healthy ways because I heard you say it earlier today. Oftentimes, to get that quick, good feeling fix, we do turn to the alcohol. We do turn to the drugs, the smoking, the cigarettes, the added sugars, like the pastries, the cakes, and all that. That's what I'm guilty of. And it's like Yeah, short term makes us feel good in the
Yeah.
moment to
About
cover
12
up.
seconds.
Yeah, it covers up what we're actually
Yeah.
feeling, right? But long term, we know not so great for us from a health perspective. And so, healthy ways, what can these be? There's so many different things out there that folks can implement into their lives. Uh, and some of the things that have come up through my work in working with people, a big one is journaling, getting it out on paper.
Yeah.
If you are experiencing anger, shame, guilt, direct it out to something or someone on paper. I don't like if you're kind of redirecting it back inside, you're basically staying in the same cycle of that emotion. So it's all about getting it out, releasing it on that piece of paper. No one's going to be reading this stuff. Be as messy as you want with this stuff. Some people, even more recently than before, which is fascinating, some clients are starting to talk to like inanimate objects. So whether they're in a forest and they start talking to a tree and they're just yelling at this tree, thinking that it's someone else or about a situation. One of my clients is talking to a son and that person's loving it. Some people write poetry, some people write songs, some people dance, some people like color or paint. Whatever the thing is for you that would resonate for you, that's what I would recommend. It's all about just like getting it out of the system because you better believe that next 5 minutes is going to be something else that makes you feel something. And it's all about, experiencing, acknowledging, embracing, releasing in a healthy way.
Yeah. I like the idea that you talk about embracing those emotions as part of the human condition. That it's only dangerous when you dwell on them too long. It's not wrong, or it's not like you're a bad person because you have a moment or an instant of feeling shame or regret or disappointment. Those are things that we try to kind of avoid. And I spend a lot of time in my programs dealing with those issues as well, but it's lingering on them for too long. They may be a signal of something that you need to do or something you forgot about or whatever, but if you linger on them, that's when the problems go on, especially if you let them play that recording in your voice, I'm no good, or that person's no good, or that situation's no good over and over again. I mean, you can see rationally when you're not in that moment how true that is, but you've got to train yourself to stay away from that doom loop. You also talk about the importance of self-compassion. Could you talk a little bit about that and how maybe rather than just saying, I'm going to give myself a break, but how do you actively practice the self-compassion?
Yeah. Uh, I love that question because anytime that I go through these 10 domains with individuals or groups, I always preface it with that self-compassion piece. And the reason why I do that, I'm not going to rehash what I already said here, but the reason why I highlight the self-compassion piece is because we do have a stress response system. We do have a brain that has not yet evolved with current day influx and inundation of mostly negative things. And so what our brains are doing is doing what it thinks it's best to manage the situation. And so I always offer that self-compassion piece to lay the foundation here, because if you are experiencing this chronic stress and burnout, it's biological. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not a pleasant experience whatsoever, but it's biological, it's physiological what you're experiencing. What's actually happening in the brain, if I may, just for like a few minutes, the amygdala that I mentioned before, when we're in an activated stress state, the amygdala actually expands in size.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, what else is happening? The prefrontal cortex, which is, connected to logic, rationale, executive reason, some positive emotions are stored in the prefrontal cortex. Along with the hippocampus, it's another part of the brain. Positive emotions are connected to that brain part, learning, memory. Those two brain parts in an activated stress state over time will actually shrink. And so, very physiological if we're not proactively managing all of this to get to that state. So that's the reason why I really talk about the self-compassion piece. And just to give people hope, just as that science got you to the chronic stress and burnout, like if you apply the science in the opposite direction, that's 100% possible. And we can bring ourselves back to living without that chronic stress and burnout. But yeah, so how does one practice self-compassion? It is being kind to yourself. What might you be telling yourself that you might not be conscious of? Like, so 95% of our mind is subconscious, and the brain is constantly working to be efficient as possible. And there might be some talk tracks in that 95% that have accumulated over time, maybe as a way to serve you back then, but current day might not be serving you. And so maybe there are some negative self-talk tracks in that 95% mindset. If you are struggling with chronic stress and burnout, I invite you to think about and track what it is that you're actually telling yourself in your mind. And if it's negative, you can do work to change that around. The whole concept of neuroplasticity, we can change our reality based on that. It's fascinating. I'm such a brain geek. I could go on for days about this stuff. But yeah, so being kind to yourself, invite you to think about what you might be saying subconsciously to yourself. If it is negative, work to say kinder things to yourself, because that could be disrupted over time. The more you repeat it, the more it becomes your new automatic. And then remembering that this is a part of the human condition. You have a brain, you have a nervous system, you have a stress response system. And just with that alone, you're not alone. Knowing that you're not alone is another like element to this self-compassion piece. Knowing that you're not alone, saying kind things to yourself. Those are the two biggest pieces that I would highlight in the self-compassion piece.
Yeah, I think people worry maybe a little bit too much, like they're going to be like, well, there was that old Saturday Night Live skit where the guy was just giving himself positive reaffirmations and they just sounded really goofy. And it doesn't have to be to that extent where you're just like saying everything is beautiful, like it's kind of like a Panglossian kind of all is for the best, but it's more of it's more the rational side of your brain saying it's not that bad, or it's better than it is, or I'm not that thing that I'm inventing at my worst moments.
Yeah. And the
It's
other thing
really
that I
hard to
would
distinguish though.
yeah. The other thing that I'll throw in there is acceptance can take us a long way.
Yeah.
And if you're going through a challenging time right now, a question that might be worthwhile to explore, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, like I'm not, like if I'm working with a client, it would be a different approach to bringing this question forward. But a question is like, is whatever you're experiencing or holding on to, will that matter in 5 years?
Yeah.
And oftentimes that answer is no. And if that answer is no, that might be a way to support us in accepting the situation more as a way to transcend it quicker and more effectively.
Yeah. I know that with the resentment part, you're feeling resentment, which is a source of stress and burnout, is asking yourself that question, what purpose is that serving me today? I mean, it does keep on lingering in your brain, but if it's not serving any purpose, and you're not like some politicians out for retribution and revenge based on that, based on that feeling, you're better. I mean, you're just rationally, you're logically better to just let it go, because there's nothing you can do with it. It's just hurting yourself. And if you somehow can internalize that message, that's important. Well,
Yeah.
this has been, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I'd love to get maybe into the whole 10 evidence-based ways to live without chronic stress. You have that as a kind of a tip sheet on your website at themindblowingcoach.com. You see that right under resources. You also offer a free 45-minute discovery session to talk about how somebody is experiencing stress and how they might work with you to relieve that for discussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just like a note about those 10, they apply to us all as humans. It's a science, but then how we apply it into our lives, that's going to be very individual and very personalized. So I offer that as we look to wrap up.
Very good. Okay. I'm Paul Banas with GreatDad.com. My guest is Andrew O'Brien at themindblowingcoach.com. You can find him there. If you're interested in my coaching programs, including my overall program with resilience, which it actually dovetails nicely with a lot of things that you're talking about. Stress is one part of resilience, including the breath work and a lot of other parts of that. You can find me at GreatDad.com/go. Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate it. Until next time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.